You ever hear a sound so sharp it rips you straight out of whatever you're doing? That's what happened to me. I was sitting in my living room, finally enjoying a rare, quiet afternoon when crack. Glass rattled so hard I nearly jumped out of my chair. My first thought was, someone's breaking in. I grabbed my phone and rushed to the front, heart pounding, only to find my front window cracked clean across the middle, and standing right there on my lawn was the culprit, Karen's son. Ryan, his hand full of rocks like he was auditioning for some neighborhood demolition crew. The boy didn't even look scared. No apology, no nervous shuffle, just shrugged like it was nothing. But when I marched outside and asked him what in the world he was doing, he grinned. That smug, bratty kind of grin that tells you he's been allowed to get away with far too much. He muttered something about being bored, and then took off before I could get another word in. I was still staring at the damage when his mother, Karen herself, came storming across the street. Her arms were already flailing like she'd been rehearsing for this showdown. And instead of an apology, instead of even a hint of concern about my cracked window, she pointed at me and shouted, "You owe my son a new phone." I blinked, stunned. "Excuse me?" I asked, thinking maybe I misheard. But no, Karen doubled down. Apparently, Ryan had dropped his phone while he was chucking rocks at my house, and the screen shattered. And according to her twisted brand of logic, I was the one responsible. My jaw nearly hit the ground. "Your kid damages my property, and you expect me to pay for his broken phone?" I asked. She crossed her arms, nose in the air, and sneered. "If you hadn't upset him last week by telling him to get off your lawn, he wouldn't have been angry enough to throw rocks in the first place. This is your fault." I was dumbfounded. The entitlement was so thick you could cut it with a knife. I told her she was lucky I wasn't calling the cops right then and there. But Karen just smirked, said she'd make sure I paid one way or another, and stormed off with her son trailing behind her. That's when I knew this wasn't over, and Karen was about to escalate things in a way that neither of us could have predicted. The next morning, I woke up to find a note taped to my front door in Karen's messy handwriting. It read, $600 for a new iPhone. Pay by Friday or I'll take action. No greeting, no explanation, just a demand like she was some kind of mob boss collecting dues. I stood there in disbelief, the paper crumpling in my hand as I read it over again. $600 for her son's carelessness? That was laughable. But what made my blood boil was her assumption that I'd just roll over and comply. She clearly didn't know me very well. Later that afternoon, as I was sweeping up bits of glass still clinging to the window frame, Karen marched across the street again. She didn't even bother with pleasantries. "So," she said, tapping her foot, "when are you paying for Ryan's phone?" I dropped the broom and turned to face her. "Karen, let me make this crystal clear. I'm not paying you a dime. Your son damaged my property. If anyone owes anyone money, it's you." Her eyes narrowed, and her voice rose like she wanted the whole neighborhood to hear. "If you don't replace his phone, I'll call the police and tell them you threatened my son. I'll tell them you scared him so badly he dropped it." The audacity left me speechless for a moment. But then I realized something. This wasn't just about a broken window or a cracked phone. Karen had lived across from me for years, always complaining, always stirring drama with the neighbors. I'd seen her argue about trash bins, about cars parked too close to her driveway, even about Halloween decorations being too scary. This was her boldest move yet. I laughed, which only seemed to make her angrier. "Go ahead," I said. "Call them. Let's see how that works out for you." She stomped back to her house, shouting over her shoulder that I'd regret this. And I'll admit, her threat stuck with me. The idea of her spinning some wild story to the police wasn't impossible. She'd done crazier things before. Sure enough, 2 evenings later, I spotted her on the porch with her phone pressed to her ear, glaring right at me while she talked. I couldn't hear what she was saying, but the smug smile plastered across her face told me everything I needed to know. Karen wasn't bluffing. She was making good on her threat, and I had a sinking feeling the cops were about to show up at my door. It was just past dinner time when I heard it, a firm, deliberate knock at the door. Not the casual kind, not a neighborly tap, but the kind that carries authority. My stomach sank, and sure enough, when I opened the door, 2 uniformed police officers were standing on my porch. Behind them, across the street, Karen and Ryan were peeking from their window, their faces lit up with smug satisfaction, like they were watching their favorite show. "Sir, we received a call about a disturbance," one officer began. "A child claims you threatened him after he accidentally damaged your property. Mind if we talk?" I nearly laughed at how quickly Karen had twisted the story. "Officers," I said calmly, "please come in. I've got nothing to hide." They stepped inside, and I explained everything. How Ryan had been throwing rocks at my window, how I caught him in the act, how Karen demanded I replace his phone, and how she threatened to call the police if I didn't. I even showed them the cracked glass on the window, the taped-up note still folded on the counter, and the small pile of rocks I hadn't yet cleaned off my lawn. The officers listened carefully, asking questions here and there. One of them frowned. "So you're saying he was intentionally throwing rocks at your house?" "Exactly," I replied. "And when his phone broke in the process, his mother decided it was somehow my responsibility. She's been harassing me ever since." They exchanged a look, the kind that told me they'd dealt with Karen before. One officer sighed. "This isn't the first complaint we've gotten from that household." Relief washed over me. Finally, someone who understood. But then, as if on cue, Karen stormed across the street, dragging Ryan with her. She didn't even wait to be invited in. "There he is!" she shouted, pointing at me like she was in some courtroom drama. "That's the man who scared my baby and made him drop his phone." "Arrest him!" The officers turned, unimpressed. "Ma'am," one said, "we've spoken to your neighbor, and his account is backed up by evidence. Unless you have proof he threatened your son, we can't take action on your claims." Karen's face turned beet red. She sputtered, waving her arms, insisting her son would never lie. But Ryan, standing beside her, looked down at his shoes. He wasn't nodding. He wasn't backing her up. He stayed silent. That silence spoke louder than anything. And in that moment, Karen realized the tide had turned, and the police were no longer on her side. Karen's face twisted into something between outrage and desperation. She kept pointing at me, her words spilling out so fast they tumbled over each other. "You don't understand! He's always been rude to my son. He's intimidating, always glaring, always telling Ryan what he can and can't do." The officers remained calm, but their patience was thinning. "Ma'am," one said firmly, "what we do understand is that your son damaged his neighbor's property. That's criminal mischief, and if we wanted, we could cite you as his legal guardian." That hit her like a slap. For the first time all evening, Karen froze. She looked at Ryan, who was still avoiding her eyes, and then back at the officers. "Wait, you mean I could be charged?" "Yes, ma'am," the officer replied. "Property damage is taken seriously. Your son may be a minor, but you're responsible for his actions. And your note demanding money? That could be seen as harassment, even extortion." I couldn't help it. I almost smiled. After all her theatrics, all her shouting and scheming, the truth was finally crashing down on her. Karen backpedaled instantly. No, that's not what I meant." The note was just a misunderstanding. "I wasn't serious!" Her tone had shifted from bossy to begging in seconds. The officers shook their heads. "Regardless, this stops now. You'll need to cover the cost of repairing your neighbor's window. And if there are any further false reports or harassment, we'll pursue charges." Karen tried one last desperate move. "But what about my son's phone? Who's going to pay for that?" One officer gave her a look so sharp it could cut glass. "That's on you. He broke it while damaging someone else's property. Actions have consequences." For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt like justice was being served. Karen's bluster had evaporated, leaving her red-faced and muttering under her breath as she dragged Ryan back across the street. The officers gave me their card, assured me to call if she caused more trouble, and left with a final warning shot aimed at Karen's house. The neighborhood was quieter after that. Ryan didn't step foot on my lawn again, and Karen avoided eye contact whenever she got the mail. The broken window was replaced, paid for out of her pocket, not mine. And that infamous phone? I later saw Ryan outside playing with an old flip phone. Maybe not the upgrade Karen wanted, but definitely the dose of reality they both needed. In the end, the message was clear. Entitlement might make a lot of noise, but when the truth shows up at your door, even Karen has to back down. If you enjoyed this insane HOA Karen story, don't forget to hit that like button. Comment below and tell us if you've ever had a crazy neighbor like this. We'd love to hear your stories. And make sure to subscribe and turn on the bell, so you never miss another wild neighborhood showdown.